right. Good afternoon, everyone. We're here to talk about Bitcoin scaling. So let's just jump into it. I guess maybe let's do a quick round of intros for the new folks up here. If you guys want to just introduce yourself, share a little bit about the project you work on, and then we'll get into scaling.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kyle. Pleasure to be here. Big shout out to Grace on the side over there, who's helping to coordinate and host today. Also to Hashkey as well. I'm part of the Stacks ecosystem. Particularly, I'm the executive director of the Stacks Asia Foundation. For those that don't know Stacks, we were one of the original Bitcoin layers, one of the early Bitcoin projects to help bring smart contracts and programmability to Bitcoin, and have since been helping to drive this entire ecosystem and a lot of what we're going to be talking about forward with other great projects as well that I'm lucky enough to be joined here on stage as well.
Hi, everyone. Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Hongzhou, and from the CKB Eagle Fund. And today I see many friends and familiar face. Yeah. And for our CKB, we also focus on the Bitcoin ecosystem and such as the RGB++ and the fiber network to do the scaling. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Arvin from B-Square Network. B-Square Network is a big modular Bitcoin scaling solution. We introduced the first Bitcoin rollup based on verification commitment and first data availability layer that achieves finality on Bitcoin. And now we are launching a series of new products, including a combination of mining and DeFi activities to provide yield for miners and Bitcoin holders.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, to get into it, on the topic of scaling, I guess first to kind of maybe set a baseline, I want to open this up to each of you, but how would you define scaling on Bitcoin, and B, why does it matter?
Yeah, for me, scalability, I go back to when I ran the Stacks ecosystem fund. So I was investing in a lot of projects that were building on Bitcoin back as far as 2021. And to me, part of our thesis was for Bitcoin to scale beyond a core network as the L1 and BTC as an asset, we needed an entire technical stack. We needed an architecture that existed beyond the L1. And so for me, still today, fast forward almost 4 years later, when it comes to scalability of Bitcoin, it is seeing that technical architecture, that technical stack exist above the L1. That all of what we're each doing, and so many as well here at this conference today, that each of us are contributing to a technical architecture to allow Bitcoin to be used not just by 10 or 100,000 or even a million, but by billions of people every single day, and that we can look beyond an asset that's a store of value and actually look towards something that can be productive. And so for me, it's about building a technical stack and letting that technical stack actually provide the flexibility to take on the amount of transactions, the amount of users, the amount of applications that we've all discussed or are going to discuss in today's panel at scale. And so that things aren't taking 60 minutes, but instead they're taking milliseconds or blinks of an eye and being able to do what we all want to do as well.
Yeah, I think this is a very good kickoff question since it's a very straightforward, successful our title. Yeah, and then from my side, I think that for when we talk about scaling, we need to think about how we to do the scaling, yeah, and what we want to scale, right? So from my perspective, I think that what we want to scale the Bitcoin's ability that not only for the sort of value, but also have the ability for the daily transactions. Therefore, when we do the scaling, we need to firstly maintain the layer one, the Bitcoin mainnet, its decentralization, its security, and then above that, so therefore you know that I want to introduce mention the layer design. That maybe above that we have a layer 2 or maybe other layers then to do some interesting things. So I think only in this way we can firstly scale the Bitcoin stability and meantime we can guarantee the Bitcoin's decentralization and security. Thank you.
I think it's really a good question because when we're talking about the limitation of Bitcoin, everyone get on the same page. It's too slow and too expensive to become a global transaction system. But when we talk about scale up Bitcoin, everyone has its own understanding or opinion because for Bitcoin, it's a charm of Bitcoin. There's no leader, no foundation to set up the evolving path for this network. Back to what we are doing. So we know that we need a layer 2 to increase the programmability of Bitcoin so that though the applications on other ecosystem can also grow up on Bitcoin. But then we realized that actually the user behavior on Bitcoin is quite different from other ecosystems. And we still believe in the core value of Bitcoin. It still stands for the involvement of a global transaction system. So how can we increase the user experience for all the Bitcoin holders? And how can we create more value, increase the asset efficiency of Bitcoin becomes our adventure to scale in Bitcoin. So that's why when we build up the infrastructure for layer 2 and the DA layer, we also provide more products for users to help them to find the native yield for Bitcoin, to help them to increase their transaction experience. So that is what we are doing now. And we believe that for many users of Bitcoin, especially miners, they are still doing these traditional Bitcoin activities of mining, and how we increase this kind of behavior can also be a way to scale Bitcoin to next level.
Yeah, and if I can add on to that for just a second, Tyler, you talked a little bit about this in your keynote just a few minutes ago as well. The interesting thing about Bitcoin is for the first almost 12 years, Bitcoin was just thought of as a store of value. It was just an instrument from the BTC side that you purchased. It had price appreciation or depreciation, and that was about it. There wasn't much more talked about of its future other than some minor and then later major upgrades, SegWit and Taproot, et cetera. But then in 2021, into the last almost 4 or 5 years, we started to see that conversation dramatically change. That all of a sudden, not only could you start to build applications on Bitcoin, you could start to do something other than mining. You could start to actually see a future that we saw on the Ethereum side of the industry. So what 7 years of development in Ethereum brought us, suddenly we could see that come to Bitcoin. Part of that big spark that really drove that further was in 23 when we saw ordinals launch. All of a sudden this excitement around, okay, it's not just about building applications on Bitcoin. It's not just about taking an asset and maybe doing something a little bit more. But now there's this whole world that Ethereum and millions of users proved to us was exciting. How do we copy and paste that into Bitcoin? And then to Erwin's point, well, we did a little bit of that, but the infrastructure is very different. And so from a scaling perspective, in summary, that's, I think, a lot of what we've all kind of mentioned is to take what we saw with Ethereum, bring it to Bitcoin, from an application level to the future of assets. We now need something that can scale structurally and technically to be able to not just take on the millions of users, but the hopeful billions of users that we're all working to drive in here immediately.
Well, I'm going to caveat this next question with the fact that our fund, UTXO Management, is an investor in a bunch of Bitcoin scaling solutions from Lightning to L2s and beyond. But I'm going to be the devil's advocate here. You know, we're sitting here. Bitcoin blocks are not filling up over the last month. Transaction fees are very, very low on chain. The network's growing slowly. Do we even need Bitcoin scaling? What's the urgency?
I'll be the villain. Everyone's looking at me. I'll be the villain to your villain question. So I think we do. I mean, at the end of the day, if we want Bitcoin to be productive, we need a technical architecture above it. We need applications that can enable Bitcoin to do something. And when I say Bitcoin, I'm talking about BTC, the asset, first and foremost right now. The L1 Bitcoin network is the most stable. It is the most secure. It is the hard rock that has built this entire industry for the last 15 plus years. From there, yes, maybe we don't need to change much there yet. It needs to be slow and steady. I very much agree with that. But for BTC as an asset to be productive, to do more than just be up and down in price volatility, we need some scalability. We need some architecture above it, or else it's just going to sit there as an asset that goes up and goes down as well. So I'll be the villain too.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, and for this part, then I think that just I mentioned, we have the layer design, just as the current internet, the TCP/IP or other architectures. That means different layer could play the different rules. So that means the Bitcoin layer, the layer 1, we just use it to do the settlement. And above that, some layer to do the programmability, and then above that, maybe we have Lightning or other channel networks. Yeah, and for that layers, we do other things. Therefore, I think that I don't think this is a problem. Yeah.
I think when Bitcoin first came to market, it was the disruptive solution for traditional finance, the most decentralized solution in the world by that time and still now. And when we are talking about Bitcoin, we can now using only the past few months, the price, the market condition. Let's look at into a more long-term vision of that, long-term perspective, and we still believe in this kind of core value of Bitcoin. And that's why we need to leverage this decentralization, this consensus power of Bitcoin itself. So that's why when we are talking about all the solutions to scale Bitcoin, we cannot copy paste all the things from Israel because these infrastructures are different. And we still believe in that Bitcoin, for its brand power, its recognition for crypto industry, is still the no other coins can compete with this brand power of Bitcoin.
And sticking with the villainous theme that I'm having on this panel, I mean, look at the numbers. Last year alone, 2024, yes, was a big theme around Bitcoin, Bitcoin layers, Bitcoin L2, and for a good reason, right? We come into 2024, there is only about 300 million of total value in terms of activity amongst the chains that were active at that time, publicly active, to clarify. Suddenly, not only do we have the fourth halving, which we're going to take out of the picture for a minute, but we go from 0 to over a dozen ETFs that allow for institutional capital and any person in the world, regardless of technical know-how or financial ability, to purchase and enter into this asset class that has been around for 15 years. That's a first. Suddenly, we go from 0 to over a dozen different token experiments and potential standards for the future. We then get to the first proofs, both verified and otherwise, on Bitcoin. We start to go from a dozen plus publicly known Bitcoin layers, L2s, sidechains, etc., to over 80. And most importantly, as all of this starts to take shape, two other big moments happen that force this question to be a yes versus a no. That's one, tokenized assets. We go from WBTC being the one of a few core assets to wrap and move Bitcoin from the L1 into the application layer, to then seeing by the end of the year over 20 different assets. 20 different assets. And part of that was driven through Bitcoin staking that gets enabled. Those two things drove a market from 300 million USD in total value at the beginning of the year to over $6.5 billion by the end of the year. That growth curve has not been seen in other networks. That growth curve shows a demand unlike other assets, and that growth curve drove infrastructure that all of us, and on the institutional side, yourselves and those in this audience, have been a part of, which is showing the need for scalability.
By the way, Kel, may I ask one question to you? Yeah, since you just mentioned that in the past year, there are so many layer 2 scaling projects. Do you think what's the reason why in this year, it seems that most of them just close their narrative?
Yeah, so I think there's a few reasons in my personal opinion. And again, I ran the Stacks ecosystem fund, so I invested in a lot of these. And then sitting on the foundation side now, I've watched and supported a lot of this industry. So for me, when we look at before 2024, we'll just use easy numbers. There were about a dozen layers. Each were trying something different, seeing what was possible, what was needed for this infrastructure to grow and scale. Then, yes, we enter 2024. Some of it was narrative, some of it was opportunity, and then some of it was great teams and founders bringing technology they had tried in other ecosystems into the Bitcoin side. Bitcoin became fun, Bitcoin became exciting, Bitcoin became an opportunity for entrepreneurs to build in. And what we started to see shake out through the rest of the year was more design-specific or interest-specific layers, where some brought programmability, some brought features for miners, some brought features for staking, some brought features for EVMs, for Solana, for the Move ecosystem. And suddenly we saw that maybe it's not just one will rule all, but that we will in fact need a diversified layer system. Some design-specific, DeFi, staking, mining, etc. Some for industries, payment, for instance, and then others that might be regional specific as well, whether that's the US, that's Asia, etc. We may see some of that shake out. But back to Erwin's point is that we're still learning how this infrastructure is built because it's a different asset class. And all of that data I just threw out, yes, we've seen it over the last couple years, but a lot of that happened in the last 18 months. And so we saw an opportunity that many went into, and now we're starting to see a shakeout of what's necessary and maybe what was not necessarily needed as well.
Yeah, I think for this part, there maybe have two points. And the first is what's our user really needs for our scaling. And for another part, since in the past year, we see there are so many ways to the scaling, such as just following the Ethereum's way. So I think when we talking about scaling Bitcoin, maybe we also do consider another part, how to scale in Bitcoin following the really Bitcoin native ways, such as UTXO, POW, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit add on that, because a little bit sauce. We still think that currently the Bitcoin ecosystem is lacking of the experience or product towards retail users. And that is also an obstacle for everyone to scale Bitcoin to next level. I believe for example, for Solana users, they have meme coin, and for Ethereum, they have all kinds of DeFi activities that they are naturally built on Ethereum. But for Bitcoin, what can we offer to the retail user is also one problem that everyone's thinking about. For example, like staking, of course, it scale Bitcoin, the market, the transaction to another value. But how could like a retail user to participate in like the game of Babylon? So that is also something that I think currently is like the obstacle or the question that for every infrastructure builder or product builders on Bitcoin ecosystem.
That's the big, for me personally, that's the big theme of 2025. We actually, Tyler, your talk mentioned this, the different eras of Bitcoin. The way that I define this era of Bitcoin we've walked into in 2025 is the era of productivity. It is the era that starts to make BTC, the asset, productive, which then starts to make it attractive for more retail users. Right now, we're pushing just around 48 million unique wallets with more than $1 USD of Bitcoin in them. That's less than 50 million, and we're talking about a populace of almost 8 billion people. There's a big gap there. And we're talking about super fun areas of categories like DeFi and staking that to us are very normal, but not to the average user retail yet. But we are starting to move in that direction, and we're just starting to open up those worlds as the user experience starts to improve on wallets. Bitcoin staking becomes a more one-click experience. Payments start to become more usable when tokenized assets can be used instead of selling your core BTC. And then lastly is that we're starting to see BTC-fi as a theme start to rise. But really that begins to open up the world of earning off of your Bitcoin, where whether you hold one of those tokenized assets, you go into staking, you go into DeFi, depending on your risk tolerance, whether you're retail or institution, you can now do something with that Bitcoin. And a lot of what the three of us, and Tyler included at UTXO, have all worked tirelessly and continuing to do is provide education. Because at the end of the day, no matter how easy we all or any of you make this experience for any retail user, it's about mindset and education. It is about educating retail and institutions how to enter into Bitcoin from the beginning into a more high-risk environment like BTCFi. It is the mindset that BTC is not just a store of value or a pet rock or digital gold. It is something much more, and there is more coming. We're just in some of the early beginnings of starting to see that grow at scale.
I would totally agree. I think that's the future I'm most excited for. One which Bitcoin isn't like gold you bury under your backyard or hide it under your mattress, but truly an on-chain economy where you can live in the Bitcoin ecosystem. We have digital money that's now programmable, and the surface area of what we can build on top of that is just starting to be scratched. Well, we've talked, this has been a great level setting about what the opportunity is. Let's get a little bit more pragmatic here. So, Hanjo, you talked on a few of the different levels like Lightning, L2s, but maybe, and this is for anyone on the panel, if you could give our audience kind of a run through of what are the different scaling approaches out there for Bitcoin, from starting with scaling L1 all the way up the stack. Where are the places to innovate?
Yeah, since we are talking about the scaling of Bitcoin, and just we mentioned the UTXO model, since maybe for someone, maybe you know that the UTXO model is different with the account model. That means you rarely host your assets. Moreover, since we have the UTXO model, therefore we can do some interesting things such as mapping. Mapping the Bitcoin's UTXO with any other UTXO chains UTXO. And in this way, we can have some script logs, maybe time logs to do some interesting such as so-called cross-chain, but without a bridge of your assets, or such as the transaction states without a bridge. And this can be more security and more decentralized. And moreover, maybe there also have another application based on the UTXO model. If you know there have some open source, such as social protocol named Lanstar. And the Lanstar, there have the event structure, which is similar to the Bitcoin UTXO model. And you can also mapping the Lanstar's event with Bitcoin's UTXO. And in this way, all your social messages can also be the on-chain assets. And just send the message, and you can transfer your identity or assets. And I think why I mention this, because I think that when we're talking about scaling, that means we're talking about the final application of the Bitcoin ecosystem. And I believe because of the difference of the fundamental technology, there should have some really innovative things happened in our Bitcoin ecosystem. Not only the DeFi, staking, restaking, just similar as Solana or other blockchain ecosystems. Therefore, I think that based on the UTXO model, maybe everyone can think about what we can do really innovative things in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Thank you.
I'll add maybe one area that I'm really looking forward to us starting to integrate into that technical architecture. So to Hanjo's point, we've got the L1, we've kind of got the L1.5 and into the L2s, and we've seen that area begin to flourish and scale in different ways. For me, the next area of scalability is going to be middleware. And middleware, the way I'm looking at it and defining it, is what we had in SaaS, which is that API layer. The layer that starts to begin to connect all of this exciting infrastructure, this scalability, all of the data, everything that we've been working on and talking about as protocols and networks here. It's connecting all of that into the application layer. In SaaS, again, it was known as the API layer that helped connect infrastructure to applications and gave birth to the entire world that we know of applications that we use every day, from mobile to online as well. I think there is an immensely large opportunity when it comes to Web3 and this entire world of crypto to see a new level of middleware, where not only do we connect, again, the infrastructure to application, but we also allow for easy connectivity of the world of Web 2 or the world of anything digital or offline to connect into this entire world of decentralization that we're looking at, whether it's, again, payments or it's identity or storage or anything, that we have that middleware layer that starts to connect everything that we're talking about together.
Yeah, I totally agree with about this idea, and I want to extend the API layer to SDK layer. Yeah, SDK layer, and such as especially when we consider about the right now we are enter the AI era, and sometimes maybe if we only want to send some information without the value transaction, we just based on the current Web 2 or maybe Launchstar, the decentralized social protocols. And when we need to do some value transactions, the Bitcoin to be the follow underlying settlement layer, and above that maybe we have bala actions. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also quite crucial for we to convert more users from Web 2 to Web 3, because when we compare the user experience between Web 3 and Web 2, it's like still a huge gap, right? So you can use like a Google service or Alipay service that with one click to do anything. You don't need to understand what's behind the scene. But for Web 3 now, because of the interoperability is quite limited between different networks, between different ecosystems, you need to like bridge from one to one ecosystem to another. You need to connect your wallet for dozens time to complete one single action. So I think that's totally what needs for the market. And when we can achieve this kind of user experience, that's the day that we lower the entry barrier for a mass adoption.
Yeah, I think that, sorry. Yeah, I totally agree about your idea to combine Web 2 and Web 3. And I think the principle is that we should to combine the accessibility and the user-friendly part of Web 2 and the digital sovereignty part of Web 3. Yeah, exactly. And I think that this is maybe in the past few years, we find that many users join into our Web3, join into the Bitcoin ecosystem, and they just maybe just making money, and they do not use the applications, and they go. Because for Web3, we do not have the accessibility and the user-friendly applications. Yeah, combining them together is a very good idea.
I look forward to the day when we can have this conversation and not talk about the financial plumbing and how important it is for users to not know about it, but instead, to your point, they're able to do whatever it is, payments, DeFi or otherwise, and just make it happen. They don't need to know that they're bridging. They don't need to know that it's interoperable. They don't need to understand custody versus self-custody versus hot wallets versus cold. All they need to know is that what they're looking to achieve, they're able to do. And I'm looking forward to that in the near future. We don't have to talk about that subject.
We got a ways to go to simplify. No, Kyle, I think that's a really interesting point about kind of the middleware connectivity piece. I'd love to hear from you a little bit how Stacks is thinking about that specifically, and like what that connectivity could or should look like between these different scaling layers.
Yeah, from the Stack side, maybe again, take it back for history. I mean, you were early and brought programmability first to Bitcoin. And so for us, scalability has kind of been a part of our culture. It's been a part of our blood when it comes to building applications. And we've been at it since 2021's mainnet. And we've been lucky enough to work with so many different networks, some of which who I'm lucky enough to be on stage, others who are out in the audience today, on working collaboratively to scale Bitcoin. When we saw the early DEXs, the early perps, the early custody solutions, the early wallets, the early marketplaces, the early gaming, the early NFT projects before ordinals, scale was always on the mind of the developers, the teams, and the founders that were coming to build on Stacks. And as we entered that post-ordinal world that we sit in today, scalability continues to sit at the heart of our culture when it comes to Stacks. And Hangzhou mentioned a little bit of this as what they're doing with CKB and also on the RGB++ Lightning side as well, is that scalability has to be a part of our culture and anyone's. Because when we start to look at cross-chain integrations, we start to look at interoperability and bringing our assets across different networks, scalability has to be on the forefront. From the Stack side, we've been working close with Aptos, with Solana, and soon to be announced very soon, a few other L1s to make sure that that scalability is in place. We also helped in a big way for the industry kind of reset the bar on what it means for scale when it comes to transactions. Last year, we did a major network upgrade called Nakamoto. That brought our transaction times from about 10 to 60 minutes as they were paired with Bitcoin blocks down to sub-seconds. So that now when it comes to speed, when it comes to performance, when it comes to transacting on Bitcoin and leveraging Bitcoin as a core network, you've got to think in seconds. You can't think in minutes anymore. And that was a huge milestone, not just for us, but for the greater side of the industry of how we can do transactions, how we can do applications at scale on Bitcoin. So from Stack's perspective, we helped reset that bar for all of us last year, and now are pushing that forward as we lean into more around DeFi and then also kind of that next world of Bitcoin productivity with our bridged asset called SBTC. Starting to see SBTC make Bitcoin usable not just on the L1, but in the application layer as well.
Awesome. Well, we've talked a lot about all the scaling pros here, all the potential here, but we also don't have any free lunch with the blockchain trilemma. Can you guys talk a little bit about what are the downsides in terms of centralization, security risk? What are the trade-offs, and particularly how do each of you guys approach those trade-offs in the solution you're working on specifically?
I can start first. I mean, we are talking about the user experience right now, and for the user experience, the trade-off sometimes is the decentralization. It's like finding the balance point between the good user experience and fully decentralization. Because if you are kind of do this like one-click action, it actually requires to some extent the centralized solution behind it. And currently for Bitcoin, especially in this case, for example, we still have this custody solutions, and that is still like some of them are still like to some extent is centralized, and also the bridge solutions, and or this like even the point system for some ecosystem, they are still like centralized. I think that's we can describe it as part of the trade-off, but we believe that there are still like builders and developers try to solve this problem and try to find the right balance between this kind of user experience and the decentralization. And also I believe to make it happen, the collaboration is quite important. Then that's why we have this like modular design for our product. We are not doing it all by ourselves. Like Carol just mentioned, like the collaboration between chains, we also have these collaborations with Aptos, with Sui, with Solana, providing the best yield opportunities for users. And also we also like seeking for a new way to collaborate with RWA project to provide these organic, sustainable rewards for BTC holders. So if you want to achieve the goals that make BTC more productive and make it easier for users with one click, you need to trade off some of the decentralization, and also it requires a high level of collaboration between different projects, different ecosystems.
Great answer.
Yeah, for this part, I think maybe the most trade-off is the economic alignment. Yeah, which I mean that because no matter which approach for the scaling, the tokenomics for this project actually firstly it should align with the layer ones, and the second is also to need to balance due to the balance of the gas of the infra and something like that. Moreover, when we consider, since there have many scaling approaches, and we want to, no matter you call it unify or maybe connect them together, I think that there have something that we need to consider how to balance between the decentralization and the centralization, the efficiency and the sovereignty part. Yeah, I think this will be the most trade-off when we consider the broader context of the scaling. Yeah.
I think we're still trying to figure it all out as a collective industry because, again, to Erwin's earlier point, Bitcoin is very different, not only as an asset, as a network, but also as an industry. And so in some respects, when it comes to centralization, it has its benefits, and some teams, some founders want things more centralized than they do decentralized. When you are decentralized, there comes with a lot of struggles, and development takes a lot more time. I think that's one thing that's maybe not talked enough about is when you are, and Stacks is one of those ecosystems that's incredibly decentralized. We have many different entities and organizations that contribute to the code base and also to upgrades. And instead of something happened yesterday or today, it takes a lot more time. So those timelines start to shift. And when you have an issue as a builder or as a founder, you can't just go to one person. You might need to go to a few different entities. Instead of having one foundation, you might have a few different entities. There's trade-offs to this whole process, and I think we're still trying to figure it out in the entirety of the Bitcoin industry is what needs to be centralized and what needs to be decentralized. When it comes to developers, what do they want and what do they not want? And again, some of that is because this is all happening very fast, and also for users. Users hear the word decentralization, and for some it's very attractive. For some it's very scary as well. And I think we're seeing that also with institutions. The idea of decentralization has maybe hindered some institutions entering this space. For others, it's starting to welcome them into this space. So while there's trade-offs and benefits, I think right now we're in a time of just trying to figure it out as a collective industry. From the Stack side, as I said, we have been decentralized by nature. Part of our entire mainnet launch was that we filed an S1 and were the first approved SEC qualified token offering in the US. And part of that qualification was that we would be fully decentralized upon mainnet. Multiple treasuries, multiple entities, full decentralization, not one singular developer or one single entity pushing it all together. That has come with a ton of trade-offs. While we have been building and leading in some respects, it has also taken more time in others. And you have more decision makers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's made things harder than from an operation standpoint, might have been more streamlined. Doesn't mean it was right, doesn't mean it was wrong. It was one direction that we chose, and others have chosen their directions properly. So I think we're still trying to figure this out as a collective industry so that institutions, retails, users, developers, there's a perfect balance at some point for everybody.
And that's the charm of Bitcoin, because no one has the right answer.
Right.
Correct, and then we're all playing back to the question about layers. That's one of the unique benefits of Bitcoin layers, is that each plays a very unique role. And we're still learning what roles, or maybe many, again, multiple roles that each will play as well. It's not going to be singular. It's not going to be copy and paste from Ethereum. It is going to be something unique. And part of that uniqueness is going to come because let's aside market conditions today, we're a $2 trillion asset class. $2 trillion. If that's suddenly fully productive, all of a sudden we have a $2 trillion market that opens overnight. The infrastructure, the layers, the pieces, the centralization versus decentralization, we don't know what is fully necessary to make that flourish from 2 trillion to 10 trillion overnight. And we're all still learning through that process together.
And I believe during the whole journey, sometimes the narratives or the needs, the demands from the user can be proved that it is wrong. It's like a fake demand from the users. And that's why sometimes we will have like 200 layer 2s and now currently maybe like a dozen. But that's totally the nature, because only the product can meet the requirements, the needs from the users can survive. And that's the rules.
We're seeing that now at scale with institutions. I mean, again, you've got more than a dozen and more coming ETFs that drove institutions. You have institutions, and Tyler mentioned them in his keynote, that have started to enter those ETFs. You've got 4+ major companies that are taking major positions into BTC on their balance sheets. You've got governments around the world, specifically here in Southeast Asia, that are starting to shift their policy to allow institutions to take Bitcoin onto their balance sheet, whether it's decentralized or centralized processes. You have the US that has just opened up and shifted their stance, et cetera. We could go on about this. And the point is that this process has begun to change because of a lot of the efforts that we have had. And decentralization has welcomed some, it has turned off others. It is now turning on many, when we look at some of that bigger picture of the macro and bigger global economic situations, and centralization has its place. You look at what Coinbase has done with Base and also CBBTC and how easy they've onboarded many users into Bitcoin. There's a path for both to exist.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time. I have a bunch more questions, but I'll sneak in one more, and we can wrap here. Let's look to the future. Fast forward 5 years. How has the Bitcoin scaling landscape evolved? What's the most significant development? What are you excited about?
So currently what we're doing is trying to provide this service to the miners, back to the core users of Bitcoin, and also providing these one-click yield opportunities for Bitcoin holders. I think that is the core idea Carol just mentioned, to make Bitcoin productive. I think you can have other approach to do so, but this will be the goal for like Bitcoin builders to provide to the market. And it's very hard to determine the right route. But I think for builders, that when your product have this answer from the users, when they are really like using your product to fulfill their needs, that will be the right way for the builders, for ourselves.
Okay, from my side, I think when we think about the 5 years for the scaling and for the technical part, I look forward for the development of Lightning Network. Especially right now, we have the template for such as USDT, and maybe in the future, we can based on RGB or RGB++ or any other Bitcoin native protocols to give this channel network programmability, and based on this channel network to more easily connect with the Web2 infrastructures. Yeah, and then for the, maybe you can call it a philosophy layer, or maybe other words that when we're looking for the scaling, somehow about we based on the Bitcoin as the underlying layer, and above that, we have some layer just focus to support the AI transactions, and some maybe have the spatial consensus that can use the in such as China mainnet or other specific region and specific users. Yeah. So one is for the technical part, Lightning Network, and for another part, we can just based on Bitcoin and have maybe different consensus layers to do the scaling for wider user. Thank you.
As I noted earlier, Bitcoin suddenly has now reached a point where no matter where you are in terms of geography, where you are as an asset allocator, where you are in terms of technical knowledge or financial knowledge, you can enter into this industry. And with that, right now, we're only at about a third of total Bitcoin market cap in terms of productive and Bitcoin-based applications and Bitcoin DeFi. 1/3%. That is tiny in comparison to what we're seeing in Ethereum. And if we reach the same ratio of about 12%, which we're seeing in Ethereum today and Bitcoin, that puts us near, again, side market conditions today, that puts us over $250 billion of opportunity. But more importantly, because you asked for a 5-year projection, we go from 1/3%, we throw in tokenized assets, we're almost 2% of productivity of Bitcoin's market cap. I hope, and I hope I'm underestimating this, that in 5 years, we're looking at 25% of Bitcoin's total market cap fully productive. That means it's in Bitcoin applications. It's in Bitcoin Fi or Bitcoin DeFi. It is earning some type of passive income for those who are holding it and not just sitting as a pet rock. And that's my biggest prediction. Next to the villainous thing I said earlier is I hope that we're at a point where we're no longer talking about interoperability and bridges, and then instead users are able to do that without thinking.
I love that. All right, 25% 5 years. Let's make it happen. This has been fun. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.